In this video, we're going to take a look at the Zbrush hard surface modeling tools. Now, there are a bunch of those. They run the gamut from being different types of brushes to different types of operations that are available in Zbrush, things like group loop and panel looping and clay polish. And we're going to start out by just looking at these basic brushes on spheres, and then we're going to create this wasteland warrior you see here, which has a combination of hard surface sculpting, hard surface brush work, as well as a bit of booleans and mesh insert. So let's go ahead and get started. In this video, we're going to talk about ZBrush's hard surface modeling tools. Now, the hard surface modeling tools aren't necessarily something that you're going to go and find in one specific place. There's actually a variety of brushes and tools which really lend themselves to creating hard surface forms. And what's really unique about ZBrush's hard surface capability is it allows you to sketch machine shapes in a way that you really can't do in other programs. Most programs, hard surface modeling involves extruding faces, beveling edges, which you can do in ZBrush using ZModeler. However, the tools that are available in ZBrush extend beyond that into some brush-based systems which allow you to sketch out ideas, to ideate mechanical pieces in a way that you can't do quite as seamlessly in other programs. So to begin with, we're just going to start on a sphere and look at some of the hard surface brushes and where to find them, and then some of the other hard surface tools, and then we'll pop into a couple projects and take a look at these things in use. So to begin with, I just have a polysphere open, and I'm going to add a couple subdivision levels to it so we get a good number of polygons here. Let's take it up to 1 million just so we get some nice crisp edges, and I'll turn on my X symmetry. Now, if we press B for brush to bring up the brush menu, there's several brushes here which would qualify as hard surface. We have the clip brushes, which allow you to clip shapes, sort of slice out parts of your model. There are the trim brushes, which are a variation on the clip curve, which actually trim, delete faces, and fill holes for you. We have the planer brush, which is probably the number one hard surface brush everyone thinks of. It's actually probably one of the hardest ones to understand if you haven't been told how to use it, because there's some brush-based settings which you really have to understand to make this brush work. There are the polish brushes. If we go to P for polish, you'll see that there is a polish brush here, but there's also B for brush, S for soft polish. We have a S polish here, and B for brush, H for hard, we have a hard polish here. We also have the trim dynamic brush, which is one of my favorite brushes for sketching hard surface forms. In addition to that, we have a variety of tools available under the geometry menu. We have the edge looping menu, which allow us to do group loops and panel loops, which we'll see in the next demonstration. And then we also have clay polish, which has a sharpen modifier, which allows us to sharpen edges, which you'll also see that in the next demonstration, the next demo in this video. So to begin with, let's take a look at the planer brush. So we'll open up B for brush, P for planer, and select the planer brush. And when you first use this brush, it might seem like all it's doing is just chiseling away at the surface like that. Well, the reason for that is the planer brush requires a depth setting to actually work. So we go to the brush menu, open up depth, and here you see we have an embed slider. That black line is the surface of the model, and the black dot is the center of the influence of the brush. So if I embed that 26 units, what this brush now does is when I touch a surface normal, it embeds 26 units, and then as I brush out, it flattens everything to that plane. So this allows me to chisel away at a set depth. Now, if we go back to that brush setting, you'll see that there is also a depth mask. Now this is unique in that it allows you to clip the influence of the brush along the high point and the low point. So depth masking allows us to create a situation like this, where if I were to clip now, you see I create these little island shapes like this. Now, a really cool way to learn this aspect of the brush is to go up to your light box, go to the brush menu in the light box, and go to the planer brushes. In the planer brushes here, there's a variety of presets. There's planer cut thin and planer cut X thin. These are great for creating what are called greebles, little irregularities in the surface of a mechanical form to make it appear more complex or give a sense of scale. So this planer cut X thin, let's turn our draw size up a bit, see if we can't get this to work for us. Let's go to our brush menu and let's bring the depth control embed up a little bit. There we go. So you see what this does is it creates these sort of floating islands. So this is actually really neat for taking an object that you have planed out and then further sort of refining those shapes and giving it more and more complexity. If we go back to our light box, there's the planar cut thin, and the planar cut thin brush is not quite as discerning as planar cut extra thin. So if you see that, these are great greeble shapes here that we can create just using this planar brush variation. And as we work on more and more complex shapes, it greebles them up, breaks them up into even more interesting forms. Now let's say we've got a little island here that we don't want. If we go back to our planar brush, remember the planar brush samples the surface normal that it touches and then flattens everything to that point. So if I turn off depth mask and set embed to 0, that puts it right on the surface. So if I come over here and I click on this plane, what it's going to do, it's going to sample that surface normal, and then I can effectively erase anything raised above that surface. So we'll do it again here. Click here, and we can then erase to that point. Now we also have the polish brushes. So if I go to B for brush, P for polish, and grab the polish brush. Polish brush and trim dynamic and trim adaptive, these are more sketching brushes where you're kind of freehand stroking on the surface. So if I take the polish brush and polish along here, I can start to sort of change these edges a little bit. Let's go back to B for brush, H for hard polish, and select the hard polish brush. And this is the polish brush with a more aggressive setting on there. And we're going to use these in a bit more detail in our next demonstration, but I just wanted to illustrate for you how they work. My favorite is Trim Dynamic. The Trim Dynamic brush just, to me, works really nicely with my particular style of sculpting. I usually just build up with a variation of strokes here, just building up on the surface, or planing away, I should say. So I want to knock this back, and you'll get a feel for it as you use it. It might not be something that you can really see demonstrated. You almost have to pick this brush up and see how it behaves. But you see, this allows me to very gracefully, gesturally sketch bevels and planes here. And this is by far my favorite sculpting brush for hard surface. If I'm going to sculpt hard surface, meaning I'm not just going to select planes and edges and plane things out. If I want to try and sketch out a complex form, I will use this brush to do that. Now, if I go up to my geometry menu and go to clay polish, here we have the clay polish button. If I press that, it will polish the clay. So you might not really see exactly what it did there, but it does give a slight polish to those faces. However, if I turn sharp up and then clay polish, it will try and sharpen the edges. Let's undo that and make it a bit stronger, and we'll turn on R sharp, which repeats the sharpening effect. Now we should see it much, much stronger. That will mask the surface. Let's rotate around here where there's a bit more to see, and then let's clay polish it again. There you go. You see it sharpens the edges. Now I can come in here with my trim brush, trim dynamic, and while there's a mask on there, you see it's actually masks the edges. I can do a bit more work there. And there we go. So we will use the clay polish again in just a bit. Now we have our clip curve. So if I go to B for brush, C for clip, there's clip circle center, clip curve, and clip rectangle. We'll start with the clip curve. And this brush replaces the visibility brush, the Control-Shift keys. So I click OK. And now when I press Control-Shift, instead of getting the show marquee, I get this curve. I can press the space bar to move it around. Now everything on the feathered edge of the curve will be clipped. Everything on the other side will stay. So I'll draw this curve like this, let go, and it's going to clip everything on this side. There you go. So if I go to the side view here and then draw another one, Control Shift click and drag, and I'm going to orient it so it's facing the right direction. If I touch the Alt key once, it puts a knot in there and it lets me draw a curve. I'll draw it again and I can draw a curve like this. If I double click it, it puts a sharp edge there. So I can create a profile like that. And now when it's finished clipping, you'll see that it clips these hard angles and these curves. Now we have other options here. There is the clip circle. So if I Control Shift click and drag, I get this circle. Now you do not want to let that crosshair over the model. So if I do this and then press the Alt key, you see what happens is it sort of countersinks this little cylinder, which might be a desirable thing that you want. But if we don't allow that to countersink and we do something like this, it carves away that circular shape. The clip circle center is just going to draw a clip circle from the center point. That's all that does. And the clip rectangle does a rectangle. Now, something that's important to understand about the clip brush, I'm going to open up another polysphere tool, and I want to show you what's actually happening here. If we go to the Morph Target menu and store a Morph Target, and then go back to our clip curve, if I clip the brush, or if I clip the tool anywhere up to this point, the center of the sphere, anywhere up to this point, it flattens just fine. However, if I clip where it starts to curve back around itself, I get this winged edge like that. Now, the reason we get that is no geometry is being deleted by this brush. If I bring back that Morph Target, you see it's taking all the faces on the feathered edge of the curve, and it's flattening them to that point. That's what the clip curve brush actually does. Now contrast that with the trim curve brush. If I take the trim curve brush and do that same slice, I need to make sure that I don't have any subdivision levels for this to work. There we go. If I do that same clip angle, that works fine. The reason being is the trim brush will actually delete the faces on the other side of the curve and then hole fill the remaining space. Now we also have the ability to use the slice brushes, B for brush, S for slice. There's slice circle, slice curve, slice rectangle. Again, they all function just like the others, except this simply cuts an edge and polygroups the opposite side. It's still the same subtool. It has just polygrouped those and cut them away from the rest of the mesh. So if we zoom in here, you'll see it's actually cut geometry there. So those are the slice, trim, and clip curves. Those are really handy for just knocking out silhouettes and getting a really strong method of carving away large portions of the model at one time, using curves, rectangles, and circles to sort of define the shapes that you want to carve away. Now, let's take a look at how we can use some of these tools in action and also leverage them against the the edge looping tools that we find here, group loops and panel loops, which are located under the geometry menu. And incidentally, the best way I think to learn any brush in ZBrush is simply open it up and start playing with it. So I would open up the Trim Dynamic brush, for example. I would turn on my X symmetry. There we go. And just start sketching. Get a feel for how this brush works and how any of those hard surface brushes work. And you're going to find that you learn it a lot easier just working on something simple like a sphere. It just takes a little bit of time and effort to kind of get the nuances of how the brushes behave. Because one thing about ZBrush hard surface brushes, the sketching brushes, they will take an orientation based on the first plane that you touch. So sometimes you just need to get a feel for how the brush is going to behave, how it's going to interact with the surface. And the best way to develop that, just like with any of the brushes in ZBrush, is the experience of using them. Incidentally, there's also the pinch brush, which we're going to use in the next setting, and I would actually classify that as being useful as a hard surface brush, but I'll show you how that factors in our next section. So let's go ahead and open up a new model. So here we've loaded up a new Z tool. This is kind of a post-apocalyptic wasteland warrior with several subtools. The one we're most concerned with is the head. The head was just a generic human head that I dynameshed and then smoothed out all the recognizable human features. The idea being that I want to turn this into a face mask, sort of like a eye protection and a breathing mask. So if we just do a little bit of smoothing through here, there we go. Now, if I turn on my masking, you see I actually have masking that's been painted on here. The masking just represents the three different parts that I want to extract. I want to create an eye mask, a face mask, and then this little bit of mech here at the back. I'm actually going to go ahead and fill in that hole right there. Now, your mask quality is going to be contingent upon the resolution of the underlying mesh. So keep that in mind when you paint your mask. If you're using a lower quality or lower resolution base, you're going to get a jaggy edge on your mask. So with the mask painted on here, I'm going to go to Subtool, and you don't need to do this step, but I'm just going to duplicate the head to have a spare copy handy, and that's just for the ease of demonstration. You don't have to do that step. With the mask applied, I go to Polygroups, and then I click Group Masked, and that's going to create a polygroup for those masked areas. If I go into frame mode, here you can see it's created a polygroup for those areas. Now I'm going to Control Shift click on that polygroup, and I'm going to click Auto Groups so each one of those shapes gets a different mask. Then I'm going to invert my, my masking, and I'm going to hide these bits here. Maybe invert visibility now. Now that's going to create a hole there. So let's invert visibility again, and I'm just going to hide these bits here. And what I will do now is I will polygroup by group visible the eye circles. All right, so that looks good. We've got polygroups now for each item, and I actually want these to be part of the eye piece. You see I've got those stray polygroups there, so I'm going to group visible on those just to keep everything nice and clean. Now with the polygroups applied, I'll go to Geometry and I'll open up Edge Loop. Now, Edge Loop is where we find our group looping and our panel looping, and this is another thing that is really a Hardsurface tool, but it's not a brush-based tool, it is a function. What panel loops and group loops does is it cuts an edge loop around your polygroup and makes it easy to extrude a very clean shape from those shapes. So under panel loops, I've got my thickness and my polish set. For now, we'll leave these as they are. We're going to leave ignore groups, regroup panels, and regroup loops off. We just want to keep our looping. And elevation determines the distance from the main mesh that it is extruded. So if I lower this to about 50, it will not extrude off the mesh quite so far. So watch what happens. If I click group loops, it creates polygroups, or creates loops around each polygroup. And if you zoom in, you can see that there are loops around there. But I want to use panel loops. So down here, I'm going to click panel loops. Now watch the difference. Panel loops is where we've got the ability to polish and add thickness. So if I click panel loops, now that creates these panels and then bevels around them. Creates these very cool, very, very interesting shapes. So I don't need the eye group, so I'm going to Control Shift click and hide these. So that gets rid of those little dots inside the eye. I'm going to keep them though. We might find them useful. So I just want to make sure that that's all I've got. And I will go to Subtool, Split, Split Hidden, and that'll split those little eyes out as a separate subtool. There we go. Looks like we've got a little back face there. Nope, that's just those little back face there. So let's go ahead and isolate this group here, and I will go to Polygroups, Auto Group, and that will automatically group every separate object, and I will hide those little dots inside the eye, and then once again I'll go to Subtool, Split, Split Hidden, and then that splits out those little eye dots. So here we go. Oops, I had my head hidden. So let's split those out, invert visibility, and then split hidden. There we go. So now we've got our little back faces off the eyes. I'll scooch that up, select this, and then go to Merge, Merge Down. So now I've got these little lenses that were sitting inside the eye area, and I've got the polygroups with extrusions for the panel looping. All right. Now I'd like to do a little bit of cleanup. So a very easy way to do that is to go to Deformation, and there is Polish by Features. Now if I polish by features with the default settings, it's not very strong, but if I turn on the radial button here and then Polish by Features, it'll give me a nice polish along those edges and just help clean up any sort of inconsistencies or warbles that we might find in the resulting model. Now I'm going to isolate the outer shells here of those panels. I will go to my gizmo, unlock it, and then turn off X symmetry and set it to the unmasked center, and then reset it, and then lock it again. Mask this by control clicking on the background, and then control shift click on the background to reveal all. Control click on the background to invert the mask, and then I can just use my scale function here to scale those out and just get this super nice clean extrusion here. I can take my move brush now. Let's turn X symmetry back on, and maybe I want to accentuate these cheekbones, so I'll just pull these out a little bit. Maybe pull this forward. Maybe I want to really bring the brow forward and sort of give it a very brutal sort of look. Let's bring that forward. Maybe we want to expand this out, but then push this back in so it's tapering back towards the head, and maybe we'll do that here as well, taper that back in. But undo that and make sure I'm looking straight down, and I'm just pressing the Alt key with the Move brush to push those faces in. And then we'll just pull those out. Then I will clear my mask and isolate this particular shell here and mask it, invert that mask, and then we're just going to adjust these shapes. Let's pull this out, maybe put a bit of an angle here, bring that out, and there we go. So what we have here are extrusion patterns that you would get if you had selected these faces and then extruded them out using a polygon modeling tool that create a very nice sharp delineation between the various surfaces. So it's a very, very quick way to establish different shapes that maintain kind of a hard surface quality to them, completely established by masking. So it's a very nice sketch-based way of approaching these things. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and save my work, and let's carry on and take a look at how we can further refine this into some more interesting kind of machined forms. Okay, with our file saved, we're ready to carry on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to isolate, say, this polygroup here, and I'm going to go in with the Clay Tubes brush, turn off my alpha. And this is what's interesting about sort of the trim dynamic brushes and hard surface sketching, is you can start out with some somewhat organic forms. So I'm going to just build up what are going to be, let's turn off frame mode so we can see this a little bit clearer, what are going to be planes here. I'm holding down the Alt key with my Clay Tubes brush to knock back those planes. Now I'm going to go to the Trim Dynamic brush, make sure X symmetry is turned on. I'm going to mask this and then invert that mask so I can see clearly what's happening here. And I'm just going to sketch some planes in here. Let's turn our draw size down. Let's go ahead and create another plane right here. I'm going to work the underside here. And then basically just sort of massaging these planes out. And this is relatively low resolution at this point. Let's go ahead and clean that. There we go. That should be fine for now. We will come back to that. And we're going to do the same thing here. Let's isolate this, mask it, invert that mask, and then I just want to put in sort of the most base shapes here. I'm going to bring a little form here and here, do our Trim Dynamic brush, and let's just sort of get an angle under that and here. Let's do a plane right here, and a plane right here. Let's get that plane along the temple there. And we'll do another one here. I can be a little cheeky and actually bevel out this under edge here on the cheekbone. Let's clear that mask. Do a little bit of smoothing along there. Go back in with our Trim Dynamic brush. Let's isolate that, and then we'll go to Visibility. Let's turn on frame mode and watch what happens. If I click Grow, it grows out to those other edge loops there. Go in with my Trim Dynamic brush, and we can run a little plane right along here. And we'll do another smaller bevel through here. Okay, now I'm going to go to B for brush, P for pinch, and I will select the pinch brush. On the pinch brush, I'm going to go to Stroke, Lazy Mouse, and I'm going to turn on Lazy Mouse. Lazy Mouse, you remember, is that sort of line that extends behind the brush that sort of delays it and helps you make a cleaner stroke. Well, we also have the ability to turn on Backtrack. Turn on Backtrack, turn on Line, turn on Snap to Track, and then turn Track Curvature all the way up. What this does is it forces my stroke along a line like this. So I can run my brush back and forth, and then I go to the stroke menu. Remember, under modifiers we have replay last. I set a custom hotkey for this to be Alt-1. So if I press Alt-1, it just repeats that stroke. So let's do it again here. Repeat that stroke. repeat that stroke. And then I can just run the smooth brush along the edge of it just to clean up any sort of stretching. Let's do this one, repeat stroke, and then we can run the smooth brush along it. We can do the same thing here. Let's hold down the Alt key so we pinch in, repeat that stroke a few times, and then just smooth. We'll do another one here. Hold down the Alt key, and let's pinch right to there. Now I don't want to catch the eye. That's real important, so let's mask that out. Now hold down the Alt key and pinch to here, replay that stroke, and then smooth it. And then reveal all. So you see the types of shapes that we're able to start getting here just using pinch and trim dynamic. I'm going to run a little bevel through here, like that, and through here. And let's see how we get away with doing one right here. Now I can go back to geometry. I can go to clay polish, and under clay polish, I've got the ability to turn up sharp and then repeat sharp. Now, if I isolate just this bit here and the edge loops associated with it, make sure I get all those, and then if I clay polish that, look what it does. I'll undo that and do it again. Clay polish, it just gives me a whole bunch more planes there. So it's kind of an interesting effect, but it actually also sort of stretches those eyes out. So I would probably want to go in with my mask, hold down Control for the mask key, and then we just do mask perfect circle, and then we could just mask a circle around the eye area here so we don't disturb those faces. And then we could get a clay polish off of those areas. Now, another thing that I find handy too is to retopologize these bits at a certain point and then divide and continue sculpting them. But I'm not quite ready to go there yet. I want to go back to my pinch brush, and I still have my pinch brush turned on. So let's pinch this, replay that stroke. Let's pinch across here, replay that stroke. Now I can turn off. If we go to stroke, I can, if I'm on the pinch brush, go to lazy mouse, I can turn off backtrack, so I'm just pinching along a curve like that, and I'll still replay that stroke. And then when I smooth, it gives me these real nice planes. You see that? Let's do this. This one right here is nice and subtle, so we'll go from here down, and then back up to here. Replay stroke. I replay it until it starts to deform the geometry, and then I just hit it with a little bit of smooth, and that cleans up the edges. I can also go back to stroke and turn on backtrack, and instead of pinching along a line, we can pinch along a spline, or pardon me, go to stroke, turn off snap to track, go to a path. So I can pinch along a path like this, and that forces it to follow that path. So if I wanted that to be more of a curve, oops. Let's go from here to here, and then we pinch that, and then replay that stroke with Alt-1, and then just hit that with a little bit of smooth. Come back under here with the trim dynamic brush and just do a little bit more cleanup here. There we go. And I'll reveal all. So you see the effect that we're getting now. We're getting pretty neat things happening here. Let's go ahead and isolate the head itself, mask that, invert the mask, and I can go back to my scale tool and I will unlock it and go to the unmasked mesh center, then lock it again. And I could scale this out just if I wanted to get a little bit more of sort of a delineation between the parts. Do something along those lines there, and that's quite cool. Now let's try a remesh here. So I'm going to go to my subtools, and I'm going to duplicate this subtool. You don't have to do that. I am simply doing it, like I said before, for ease of demonstration. And I'm also going to save my work. So I'm just going to pause the video and save my work, and then we'll carry on. There we go, with the work saved. Now we can go to geometry. And under geometry, we've got Z-Remesher. Now, Z-Remesher in the last version of ZBrush was redesigned to be more effective with hard surface shapes. So what we can do here is we can click Detect Edges, and that's going to try and detect hard edges and preserve them. We could also try to keep groups, and we'll leave our target polygon count. We'll leave it at 5 and see how we go. So I'm going to click Z-Remesher, and it should pop right through there. Let's see the final result. I find sometimes when I'm trying to do a hard surface shape, remeshing it really does help. That's a bit too low. I am going to turn this up to 10,000 faces and Z-remesh because I want to try and get some of those shapes that we've already, some of those planes that we've already sculpted in. There we go. That's better. Go into frame mode. Now there is a little error right there, but that's something that we can clean up. That's no problem. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to turn off keep groups. Now keep creases, by the way, that will keep the creased edges. So because we have polygroups here, I can go to crease and crease all. So if I crease border, it adds tags to the edge of partially hidden meshes. And if I go to crease all, it does all the edges. So if I do crease, it should crease everybody who's got a polygroup. So let's go back now to geometry, Z-remesher, and keep creases as well. And I think 10,000 faces was pretty good. So let's do another Z-remesher on that. There we go. That's nice. That worked out rather well. So I will go ahead now and add a subdivision level. And let's turn off frame mode. And I'm going to go in with the damn standard brush here, and I'm just going to do a couple little bit of like wrinkles along here. Let's turn off our X symmetry. I want this to feel like perhaps it's a softer sort of under mask. Maybe this is made of rubber or something. I'll go in with my standard brush in Alpha 1 because, as I said, whenever I do a subtractive stroke, I always ask myself if I should add an additive stroke on top of that. Just want to make it feel like this is stretching in this area. Let's do a little bit of a tension wrinkle here. We can smooth off those edges and go in with the damn standard and do a couple more here. And go in with the standard brush and just build up with a couple additive strokes here. A lot of this is covered by the scarf and the costume, so you don't have to spend too much time on it, but I thought it would be a nice way to give some attention to it. Let's go to visibility. Grow. Let's turn on frame mode so we can see grow. There we go. And turn off frame mode. Mask this, invert the mask, and I just want to do a couple more sort of wrinkles here. And just hit that with a little bit of smoothing. There we go. And let's invert that mask. And then we'll come in with our trim dynamic brush. Actually, I'm going to clear the mask and add another subdivision level. And make sure that our X symmetry is turned on. Now we can come through here and do some more work on these planes. Now, I really quite like sketching the planes in using these brushes. Again, I said it before, I think Trim Dynamic is probably my favorite hard surface sculpting brush. There's just something really appealing to me about sculpting in hard surface shapes in a freehand manner. It's just so different than anything that I've experienced outside of ZBrush. Let's go ahead and isolate this. Grow, grow, grow. And then let's put a little plane through here. There we go. That's a nice little scalloped plane there. That's a nice touch right there. Again, it's just, you're just sketching. You're literally just sketching these forms. I'm going to leave that hard edge around the eyes because I kind of like how impersonal that is. And we are going to fill those with some lenses in a moment. Let's bring that up to here. And then let's do another bevel along here. Now you might find that you prefer using the polish brushes to trim dynamic. You might find that you do love trim dynamic or you like trim adaptive. The only way to really figure out any brush in ZBrush, really, the only way to really learn it is to experiment with it. As I said before, that you have to get in there and start trying the brushes on your own. So let's do a little bit right here and reveal all again. And these are looking pretty nice. I think what I'm going to do is go to my pinch brush, go to stroke, and turn line back on and snap track back on. And let's just do a little bit of pinching here. And replay that stroke. Replay this stroke. Replay this stroke. And then just hit that with a little bit of smooth to clean up the edges a little bit. Let's go back to stroke, and we'll use path. Draw a path through here, and then as soon as it sort of curves back over itself, it forces it to backtrack. So we'll replay that stroke a few times. Ah, that's nice. That's nice right there. I like that. Again, be really careful that you don't distort the eye area. So I might go in and I've still got my mask circle. I might just go ahead and protect that eye area. And if you find that distracting, you can always go to masking and turn off view mask. Just don't forget you have a mask turned on, because sometimes it's easy to forget if you've turned it off. So let's pinch through there. I don't want to do that. Let's isolate that before we do that. So we'll pinch through here and then replay that stroke. Hit that with some smooth to fix that transitional area. Turn my draw size down. If you hold down the Alt key while you pinch, it pinches in. So we can pinch in like this, replay that stroke, and then smooth along that edge. Clear that mask that we have hidden. And there we go. Now I can isolate this bit again and then go back to my geometry clay polish. And let's give this a go with clay polish. That's pretty nice. If we double it up, it creates a mask. You can't really see it clearly, but there is a mask that's created the first time you clay polish. I'm going to turn it down and see there, that's much better. I like that much, much better. So I'm just going to do one clay polish like that, clear my mask, and then I'm going to go in with the soft polish brush, just to give you an idea of what this brush does. And let's change to a metallic material, because sometimes it's a little bit easier to see what's happening here with a different material. So if I take the soft polish brush to this, you see it sort of buffs out the little imperfections, like right there. It's literally like a polishing brush, like you might take a polishing cloth in the real world. So it's, it's very much analogous to physical media. There we go. Just change our materials. You can see the difference. I'm going to go back to basic material 2. All right. And let's go ahead and select this guy here. Make sure that my X symmetry is turned on. Go to trim dynamic, and I'm just going to run a little bevel along this edge, which will help clean up that little inconsistency in the remesh. There we go. And oops, let's come through here, bevel that, and then let's do a clay polish. Clear the mask, and let's do another clay polish. There we go. Reveal all. Fun, fun. Now we can go in. We're only at 340,000 faces because we remeshed. We were able to get this quality with fewer faces. We can divide again. Let's make sure that all of our subdivision levels or all of our bits are visible. We don't have a mask. So let's divide again. So we get to 1 million. Remember that we've got under our light box, we have these planar brushes here. So go to the brush menu and planar, and I might grab planar cut thin. This might be a good time to play around with doing some greebling like this. Maybe we'll come into this bit here, and I'm going to actually isolate that. So let's Control-Shift-Click on that. Oops. And then we can turn our draw size down, and then just do a little bit of greebling, as I like to call it. I don't like that one there. Let's do another one here. And let's bring our visibility back up and see how that looks. I'm going to undo that. and be a little bit sharper with it, like this. B for brush, P for planer. Remember that we can take the planer brush, let's turn our focal shift down so it's very, very hard edged, and then we can sort of clean up shapes as we like. I'm going to leave that one just like that. There we go. So let's turn off solo so we can see our other bits, and now that's coming together quite nicely. I want to put some kind of a texture on this head, so I will change to a different material. Let's give it kind of a ruddy black. Something like that. Go to RGB and let's isolate just this part here and go to color, fill object, and turn our visibility back up. Oh, you know, that's a bit too dark. Let's undo that. Let's make this, maybe everything else is so warm. Let's make it blue. Let's make it cooler. There we go. Let it autosave and then go to color, fill object. There we go. That's better. That's a nicer contrast. Cool. Now I can, again, I can isolate these bits here, and I'm going to save my work before I carry on. So I'm just going to pause the video and do a quick save. And then what we can do is we can use the surface noise materials, noise maker, to add some more detail here. So I'm just going to pause and save, and then we'll be right back. All right, so I have the inner cowl isolated. So let's go to surface, noise, and press frame so we can frame this mesh, and then go to noise plug. And let's see how we do with a hex tile. Might not work very well because we don't have UVs on the mesh, but we can give it a go. So we go to hex tile and click OK. And turn mix basic noise down to 0. Turn the plugin scale down. And turn the strength in. Now, of course, that is going to give me stretching there, but because there's not much going on the front, what I can do is I can change my Y angle like that and sort of relegate any sort of stretching to the front and back where we don't really have anything going on. Let's, oops, Y angle, let's rotate that. There we go. That's a bit better. Yeah, that's better. Let's turn our strength up, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm actually going to allow it to manipulate the RGB like that. That's pretty neat. So let's go ahead and click, well, we don't want to click apply to mesh just yet because we only have 788,000 faces on this. So let's go to subtool, and let's go ahead and split this out. So I'm going to go to split, and I want to split hidden, but it's not letting me split hidden. So let's isolate that. It's not playing nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my mesh up, isolate that. Let's add one more subdivision level. Control D, isolate that, mask, reveal all, invert mask, and then go back to surface and click apply to mesh. And that should then bake down that detail perfect. Gets it right there into that that under cowl, so to speak. Let's grab these pieces here. These are pretty interesting. I think that we could do some cool stuff with this. I'm going to step down the subdivision levels, and I'm going to zoom in here, and I don't have polygroups right now, so I'm going to go to B for brush, Z for Z modeler. You can see how Hardsurface just takes advantage of so many various tools across the ZBrush interface. I'm going to go to polygroup and set it to polyloop, and I'm going to click. Oh, that's right, I can't do this if I've got multiple subdivision levels. So what I need to do is go to B for brush, S for select, go to select lasso. So this is the solution if you've got multiple subdivision levels and you can't polyloop. Control Shift click, and let's go back here. Let's isolate this, not working. Isolate this bit here, Come on, grab that edge. There we go. So if we click on these edges, what it's going to do, it's going to hide that poly loop. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to manually group the front faces. Control Shift click. So that's the solution if you want to do a poly loop selection, but you have multiple subdivision levels. Go to polygroups and group visible. Now you can see that that is nicely grouped, separate from everything else. So we step back up our subdivision levels. And let's go back to the standard brush. And I'm going to save my work while we're at it. So demo 2. Okay, so now if I isolate this bit here, and I'm going to isolate the edge ring as well, and I'm going to invert visibility. I'm going to try to go to deformation, polish by features, turn that on, and then polish this by features and see if I can't get a little bit of cleanup on this. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. Mask that and invert the mask, and I just want to take this and I can just manually scooch that up. That's no problem. Now I'm going to Control Shift click to hide everything but these faces. And then I can go to inflate, and I can inflate these out if I like. Or if we undo that, I can take the transpose gizmo. We can just click on that face, and we can drag that out manually. Get something interesting like that. If I unlock and adjust this so it's sort of sitting along the axis here, maybe move it back to here, then lock it again, I can then rotate it out along this edge and then move it back in, so we get a little kind of a scallop out of this way and a scallop in this way. So it's sort of, as you can see, it sort of creates a little contrast there. Let's scooch that up. There you go. So you can see that it creates a very interesting compound form here. Maybe we'll scale it down in this direction and scale it down in this direction. And then clear our mask. So that's quite interesting. So we can add a little bit of detail like that. Go back to our geometry and step all the way back up to our highest subdivision level, and everything will look nice and crisp again. I'm going to make sure that I'm at my highest subdivision level. I'm going to isolate this piece, isolate this piece. I'm going to go back to B for brush, S for select, and go to the select rectangle so I don't have it trying to select edge loops anymore. Control Shift click, Control Shift click, Control Shift click. There we go. Invert visibility, and then go in with our trusty trim dynamic brush, and then we can just manually clean that up. There we go. All right, so let's turn off solo, look at everything together. That's looking pretty cool. Now what I'd like to do is I would like to put some mesh insert items in here. I want to put in some lenses for the eyes and a couple filters here for the gas mask. So to do that, if I'm going to do mesh inserts, I always duplicate my mesh. Then I step down my subdivision levels. Let's solo it so we can see. I step down my subdivision levels about halfway. In this case, it's so high res, I could probably go quite low. And delete lower and delete higher. This is going to be my proxy mesh that I'm going to insert my my objects into. So go to B for brush, I for insert, and then we can go to, say, for example, machine parts, or B for brush, I for insert, and go to model kit. Model kit has a variety of really cool things in it. So let's say, for example, I like this bit here. So what I can do is, now it's going to be hard to draw this into the eye socket. So I'm going to put this elsewhere, and then I'll show you how we can do the eye socket pieces. So let's come back here. I'm going to turn my draw size down because I want to put a few of these in here and I want them all to be the same size. So I click and drag to start the insertion and then press and hold Control, and it snaps that to the draw size that I have currently set. So if I do that again, press and hold Control, it snaps that to the draw size. Now if I want to countersink them, just turn on the move gizmo and I can just scooch it right along the axis, just like that. Let's do another couple here, pressing the Control key, and that will snap those to be the same size as the other two. So that's kind of a neat little greebly detail on the back. Let's see about putting something else back there. There's all sorts of really wonderful shapes available in here as you go through. Let's see if we can't find something. This is nice here. So click and drag, press the Control key. That's a bit, I don't like that because it's too rectilinear. There we go. That's pretty cool. So click and drag. Oops. Turn off the X. There we go. And I'll just manually scale that down and countersink it a little bit more into the head. There we go. Very cool. Clear our mask. Come around here to the front. Let's do a couple of those here. Turn our draw size down. And that fits perfectly there. That's quite nice. Let's do some fasteners, some things that feel like fasteners, but not necessarily screws. Let's come over here. I saw a couple things. There we go. That's pretty neat. Turn our draw size down. Make sure we have X symmetry turned on for this. I did not have X symmetry turned on for that last one. So let's see. Let's go back to that. Let's grab that again. Let's undo. Make sure X symmetry is turned on so it's drawing on both sides. And hold Control. Oh, I want it to be bigger than that. Turn this up. Hold and press Control. We can scale it down manually if we need to. There we go. That's good. Now let's go back up here with the fasteners that we were looking at. I found it. Oops. I keep sweeping past it. It's right there. This is a pretty neat looking fastener. Turn my draw size down. Click and drag. Hold down the Control key. Let's put one here. And we'll make a smaller one here. Maybe we'll do a couple on the side there. And this guy doesn't want to be left out, so let's put a couple here and a couple here. There we go. Now I've got all these mesh inserts. What I want to do is I will go into frame mode, and I'm going to hide the polygroups for everything that's not my mesh inserts. This can be a little time consuming, but it's not too bad, and it's quite worth it once it's all said and done, because then we have a totally separate subtool just for all of our little greeble details. There we go. Make sure that get rid of that. There we go. Those are just our mesh inserts now. So I will go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, because that head was, as I said, just a proxy mesh. Let's change these to something metallic and go to Material, Color, Fill Object, and then go back to our basic Material 2 and turn off Solo. There we go. So now you can see those mesh inserts living on the head. So if I want to do the eyes, what I'll do is I'll go back to my original head here, and I'm just going to duplicate it. This is going to be, as we've said before, a proxy mesh. Let's solo this. We can clear the mask, and we can step down our subdivisions if we have any, and we don't. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off solo, zoom into the eye area here, and then with my insert brush, let's do something like this. Let's grab this guy here, click and drag, and then that will bring those. Maybe we want to make that a little bit bigger. Click and drag, so that fills out those sockets a little bit. And then let's do another one. let's see about something like this. We can stack these on top of each other to make things quite cool and interesting. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to undo that one and I'm going to start with this one. There we go. And then, let's see, let's go back to, I kind of like that one as it is. Might take something like this, click and drag, W for move, and then we'll countersink that a little bit. Maybe we'll scale that down. Don't be afraid to just manually place these things. It's not against the rules. Bring that out. Oops, I'm deforming it. Here we go, let's scale it. And let me see. Bring this like here. And let's scooch that like this. Let's unlock this, reset the gizmo, and then we can get a little ring like this. Bring that out. And clear the mask. Control-Shift-Click and we can get just this insert here. We'll mask that. Let's solo it so we can actually see what we're doing. Let's hide the head. Oops. Let's hide that ring. Hide that. Hide that. Hide that. There we go. Mask it. Reveal all. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key so I can change the angle of my gizmo. And then, oops, invert my mask. And I just want to pull those lenses out. Scale them down. Scale them down. I just want to make sure that they sit inside that ring. There we go. Clear mask and reveal all again. Cool. All right, so let's see. Let's put some kind of breathing housing on here. Let's do a bit right here. Make sure that we get these on both sides. I'm going to undo. Turn my draw size up. Click and drag. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. That's a neat shape there. And clear my mask. All right, so now I need to solo. And again, I'm going to delete everything that is not an insert mesh. So the easiest way to do that, because I don't need to worry about keeping polygroups on this proxy head, is to go to polygroup, auto group, then that will polygroup the head. I could easily hide it, go to geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, and then show all again. So now we've got our little eye bits in there. So the last thing I want to show you is a way that we can take this mask here and punch out a wire mesh in it, or a mesh of holes. So I'm going to save my work. All right, so I'm going to Alt-click on the face mask here. Make sure that we don't have a mesh insert brush selected when we do that. That will just automatically select that polygroup. And once again, I'm going to create a proxy object by duplicating this mesh. And go to geometry and let's go into frame mode. I am going to isolate just the face mask. I'm going to delete lower and I'm going to go to delete hidden. Now I'm going to go to Z remesher and I'm going to remesh this to 0.2. And that should give us a nice low resolution version of this. I also want to make sure that my X symmetry is turned on when I do this. I want it to be a symmetrical remesh. We're creating a proxy mesh into which we're going to insert a nanomesh brush. Now, if you haven't seen nanomesh brushes yet, watch the video on nanomesh because I've got a whole lesson just on that. And we're also going to be using booleans in this section. If you haven't seen the video on booleans yet, you can learn a lot more about them if you watch the boolean section. But I just want to touch on those here because it works really well for this particular character. So here we go. We've got a nice remesh here. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to go back to B for brush, Z for Z modeler, select Z modeler, and I want to go to polygroup, polyloop, and I'm going to polyloop group all this stuff here. My point being I want to isolate these areas right here that I've just isolated. So let's polyloop this, polygroup loop, I should say. These and these. Great, now I will Control-Shift-Click on that polygroup to hide it, and I will go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. This is just a proxy mesh. Now I'm going to go to B for brush, I for insert. I'm going to insert primitives, and we're going to select the cylindrical pipe. I'll go to brush, create. Now, if I have an insert mesh brush selected and I click create nanomesh brush, what that does is it creates a nanomesh brush. And nanomesh brushes work through ZModeler. You see my operation is now insert a nanomesh. Go to the space bar. I want to make my target polygroup all. Make sure that I've got the cylindrical pipe selected, and if I click and drag, it will insert that mesh on every one of those faces. Now if I go to the tool menu and I go to nanomesh, I can adjust things like making them all fit to each face, scaling them up. I can then, let's zoom in here, make sure we don't get any distortions. I'm getting a little bit of distortion there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my nanomesh off. I'm going to go to geometry or deformation, polish by features. Ooh, not that much. Turn that off. There we go. And that will even things out a little bit. And now go to nanomesh, turn nanomesh back on, turn on proportional. Now that's going to make them all the same size. Now we'll turn our sizing down. There we go. And I want to change my length, or not my length, pardon me, my height. So turn the height up, and then our Z offset will turn down so they're interpenetrating the shape there. Let's turn our height up a little bit more. So basically we just want a whole bunch of these long tubes, just like this. And let's see if we can't get away with getting them a little bit bigger without making them touch. That should be good. Now I want to turn this into actual geometry because these are just instances. So I go to Inventory, 1 to Mesh, and then I will Control-Shift-Click on that proxy polygroup to hide it. And I'll go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Go back to our subtools. And let's see, where is our face mask? Right there. Let's take that. Perfect. So let's turn solo mode off. Now you can see where these are sitting in relation to the rest of the model. So these are going to work out really nicely. On second thought, I don't think I actually want to use these little bits here. So what I'll do is I will go to B for brush, S for select, do select lasso. And I'm just going to manually hide these. And as you can probably guess, we'll go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Now, what I'm going to do with these is I want to create what looks kind of like maybe a little like breathing mesh or something. And I'm going to do that with Booleans. Now again, there is an entire video just on Booleans. I'm going to select the head base here, and I'm going to put it in a folder by clicking New Folder, and I'm going to call it Head Mask Parts, and I'm going to put the pipes inside there. Okay, and I'm going to save my work because I'm about to clean up my subtools really quickly. So let's save this as 4.zpr. So we're back from saving our file now, and you can see we have a folder for the head with the head inside of it. I'm just going to clean up things a little bit here. I don't need these proxy pieces anymore, so I'm going to click delete. I'm going to say always okay, but be careful when you do that because it will then let you just delete anything willy-nilly. So just be super careful if you do elect to do that. Head base 4 we're not using. Sometimes I'll solo things just to make sure. Yeah, I'm going to delete that. And the head base no mask, I'm going to delete that. And then everything else, I'm going to create a folder and call it costume. And then I'll just drag all these bits inside the costume folder. Let's turn up our visible count so we can see everybody. And it looks like I've got one extra head down here that I will delete. So let's delete that. There we are. We can close that. And these are all of our greebles for our head. So we can leave these outside for right now. Turn solo off. And then we're going to select these pipes. Now these pipes are inside this folder. So if I turn on subtraction mode here, it's going to subtract from whatever is above it in the folder, which is the head. So watch what happens when I turn on live boolean. When I turn on live boolean, it now subtracts all those cylinders, creating this interesting kind of mesh here. Now, the mesh still exists. If I go into frame mode, you see that it's still there. So I could potentially do something like this. Maybe I want to go to polygroups, auto group, and I want to group each one of those separately because maybe I don't want some of them. I don't like the way they're intersecting with each other on the outside here. So if I do Control Shift click, I can hide some of these. Auto group. There we go. Get rid of those. Maybe get rid of that one. Maybe get rid of that one. And get rid of that one and that one. That one. I'm going to go to my selection rectangle so it stops trying to isolate by polyloop. Oops. Get rid of that one. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And let's turn solo off and see what we've got here. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to get rid of that one and that one. And let's get rid of these. Oops, not that one. Get rid of these two in the center here. There we go. Now turn off frame mode. And I kind of like that patterning a bit better. So I'm going to go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, and it's just going to delete those out of the Boolean object. Now, if you want to learn more about Booleans and how to bake them down into new geometry, definitely watch that video that's specifically about Booleans themselves. But this is our look at Hardsurface. So we've run the gamut of just about all the Hardsurface tools, from the Hardsurface brushes that are purely Hardsurface, like the planer brush, into the Hardsurface sketching brushes, like Trim Dynamic and the polish brushes, and then into the operations, like clay polish and edge looping, group loop, and panel looping, that we can use to create Hardsurface forms. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and this has sort of demystified ZBrush Hardsurface for you, because it's a really powerful tool set, but you just have to get a feel for how it actually works. So hopefully this video has accomplished helping you get that feel so you can go forward and start using this on your own. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.